Hi, welcome to episode 2 of our Flourish Series. This is our opportunity to dig a little deeper into some of the content. Today I'm here with Dave Balestri. We're going to talk about flourishing friendships. And to frame that up a little bit, I wanted to refer to a famous quote. Someone who is remaining anonymous once said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And with that in mind, Dave, I think it'd be great to actually take time to unpack what does it mean to have flourishing friendships?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. I'm really excited actually to be unpacking this. I think that one of the things that we need to reconcile is that the Bible isn't just a book about, what we would say are spiritual things. It's a book about life and how to not just flourish in, I know there's this dichotomy about flourishing in spiritual things, but not in natural things. The Bible is the book of life and the book of flourishing. And I think that, we've touched on this before, that especially the book of Proverbs, it's not the book of suggestions. It's even not even, I even say it this way, it's not the book of options. It really is God's blueprint for how to flourish in all areas of life. And I really believe that with regards to friendships, that one of the biggest challenges to flourishing is that there's all these information and opinions about how to do friendship well and what is a good friend and all the rest. And all those things are wonderful talking points. But the question at the end of the day, or the thing I think that we need to work out is, what does the Bible say about, how does the Bible order, what's God's order for friendship, and so that our lives will flourish in the midst of that? And I think one of the big thoughts that I carry is this, and I've said this to many people in many situations, many counseling situations, when there was a struggle maybe in relational issues, whether that's family or whatever, but especially in friendships. And I've said, you know what? I really believe that God places pieces of our destiny, the grand plan, as it were, for our lives. I really believe that God places pieces of our destiny inside others. And my statement is, I don't know if I've ever met a flourishing hermit. I've met a lot of weird ones, I've met a lot of, but not anyone that, lives a life or a context that doesn't do friendships well, that I would say, gee, they're doing really strong. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was a young guy, my father had a relationship with a very wealthy gentleman. And one day my father and I went for a drive to this man's house. And I remember pulling up into this driveway, and I mean, it was, for a young guy, I thought it was a castle. It was just not like the movie The Castle, by the way. I'm talking about like a mansion. It really was a mansion. And I remember walking in the front door, and it was marble everywhere, and my eyes were just, oh my goodness, I was a young guy. I thought, oh, this guy is so, really doing well, flourishing. But, over the years, as we dealt with that man, and I saw his relationships that were very strained with just about everyone. In the end, I remember saying to myself as a young teenager, I don't care how much money this guy's got. I actually don't envy anything about this man's life. Wow. I'd rather have great friendships. I'd rather have great connection with people than have all this money and yet be miserable, And so I suppose the way that I just want to sort of kick it off is this thought that in the Bible, there's definitely, I think, 3 levels of, when we talk about friendships and we talk about, flourishing, I think there's 3 levels of relationships with people that we need to understand that is biblical and there's wisdom in it, and be careful not to mix that up. I think that if we're going to have flourishing friendships, the Bible speaks many times about leadership or fathering leaders, mothering leaders. So I think that one of the key things, if we're going to flourish in friendships, that one of the things that we need to have is people that are mentors to us. You know, people that are, I always say, you know, one of the key things is find someone who is living in your preferred future.
Wow.
Or your preferred future that is a revelation to you, and pursue that person. I think the second level of friendships that we need in our lives to flourish is we need peer level friendships. We need people that get us, understand us, and maybe are running along sort of similar tracks than us. I think peer level friendships are really important. And then the third level, which is I think that this is probably a little bit, depending on the stage of your life that you're in, really this thought about, well, and who are you now mentoring? Now, I don't think you have to wait till you're 60 years old, by the way, to do this. I think that, there should be, I think as obviously if you have a family, you're mentoring your children as a parent or whatever, but even if you don't, that's irrespective of that, there are others that, are watching you. That might be, that might be even in the sense of that they don't necessarily even have to be believers. I mean, I know as an employee in a company that I was mentoring or I was modeling something to the people that I was managing, so that's not only at home. I think that those three levels, who am I being mentored by, or who's my mentor or fathering leader, who are my peers, and then who am I mentoring or being an example to? Those three dimensions, I believe the Bible speaks. I like in some respects, the honesty of the Bible that you see in different accounts, whether it's, a young David with King Saul, where the mentoring relationship is not good, right? And, or there's Joshua and Moses, and, even though you go, well, Dave, what's the scripture and verse around these? You just go, well, hang on. You just got to see the relational patterns in the Word of God, and see when those patterns were working well, when the mentor was working well, or the peer thing was working well, or even the mentoree thing was working well, you see the flourish about it. And then you also see the other side of it when it wasn't, right?
Right.
I love this thought, though, that when we get those right, things flourish and things open up. I think a lot of the distress that we find and the limitations we find in this area of relationships is when we mix these up.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, we try and, for whatever reason, maybe we've got a mentor and we try and be very familiar, over familiar. It's a bit like an 11-year-old son trying to be over familiar with their father. Of course, there's love and there's connection and there's nurture, but, dad's not first your mate. I remember saying to my children as they were growing up in their teens, I was saying to them, I'll always be your father first. I can be your friend, we can, all of that stuff, but I'm not your friend first, I'm your father first, and that never changes.
It's really good. It's
So I think that's what happens. There's this pattern, and the book of Proverbs is so rich. As a matter of fact, over half of the Proverbs, the sayings that Solomon pens and the author pens there are about interpersonal relationships, right? And when the book of Proverbs opens at the start, it's a father, as it were, speaking to his son, going, hey, I'm going to give you, as it were, strategies, biblical strategies on how to flourish in life. Like, listen to these words, grab a hold of them. This is wisdom to you. I like this thought. So the thought then is, okay, great. Okay, so we've got an order in friendships and so that we can flourish. And then there's like, well, what makes a good friend? Well, like what makes good relationships? And, the first point there is this thought about you want to make sure that your friends are faithful friends.
So good.
Proverbs speaks about this thought about fair weather friends. And there's many of them, Proverbs 14:20, Proverbs 19, verse 4, 6, and 7. This thought about fair weather friends. It's like when you're young, here's the interesting thing. When you're young, it's like, how many friends have you got? Oh man, I've got 100 friends, But when you get to, I say my age, when you get into your 40s, as you get older, let me just say, the number of friends that you have that you would call friends diminishes, not because you have less friends, but actually you begin to realize that just because someone is near in your geography doesn't make them your friend. Yeah. In school, it's like, well, everyone in my class is my friend. But actually, as life comes through, you begin to understand, hang on, there are fair weather friends, people that, love to hang around, but who's going to stick with you? Who's going to really put in the time and when things are good and when things are bad, when you're in the valley seasons of your life, I always say, look around, because whoever's still with you, they're your friends,
That's great. If I can jump in on that.
Yeah.
It's, Proverbs 17:17.
Yes.
A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. And 18:24 in Proverbs, a man of many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you have defined yourself as somewhat introverted.
Yeah.
How does your personality, how have you encouraged people also that you're coaching to harness understanding your own personality, but how you engage in relationship?
Yeah, I think that number one, whether you're extroverted or introverted, if you don't have a high value about friends, like if that's not a high value to you, then you'll give up. The reality is you won't be a good friend. That's true. So the moment that you have a great or high value about friendship, the first thing that happens is not just about, well, I find good people. You yourself go, well, I want to be a good friend. And then then it's, the other thing I think is this thought about, I just believe that friends are a gift of God. And there are friends that are assigned to my life.
Yeah.
And if they're assigned to me, then I have a responsibility to help them in whichever way I can. I always say that how to be a good friend, make sure that you're making the person that you're a friend to bigger, better, and braver.
That's great.
Bigger, better, and braver. So the opposite of that, anybody that's making me smaller, belittling me, right? Good. Anybody that's making me not as good a person, or anyone that's probably making me more fearful, is not the friend that I need to be walking with. Bigger, better, braver. That's the analogy. Now, the point to that though is because the second part of a good friend is authentic, which is someone that's going to tell you the truth, right? So it's not if you have to surround yourself with friends that are always telling you everything's nice and sugar and spice, right? Then actually that's not the way. There's a bunch of proverbs here. Proverb 29:5 says, "A man who flatters his neighbor is spreading a net for his steps," right? Or Proverbs 27 verse 5 and 6. I love this. It says, "Better is an open rebuke than love that is concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend," right? "But deceitful are the kisses of the enemy." Now the question is this: do you value friendship, and do you value this thought of friends being authentic to you, or because if you can't handle that, if all of a sudden if a friend tells you something, if I say to you, Bruce, there's something in your teeth, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden you go, oh, you're not my friend anymore. like really, you just go, well, hang on, that's not authentic. That's not biblical friendship, by the way. Yeah. I'd always say, I'd rather a friend tell me that I'm ugly, that I'm doing something that's ugly, so I can adjust it, because at the end of the day, the thing that I realize is they're challenging a behavior. They're not challenging my identity. Yeah. They love me. That I think about that even with my kids. I've always been grace and truth with my children. I absolutely parent in an environment of grace, but that doesn't exclude truth.
No, that's exactly right.
Right? Because at the end, I want them to be bigger, better, and braver. Yeah. And if I, here's the thing: if I'm all truth and no grace, I'm not making them bigger, better, and braver. I'm probably making them bitter, right? Yeah. If I just do grace without truth, I've not built capacity inside of them.
That's right.
Because I've, mollycoddled them in many ways. And I love this. Proverbs 16:16 says, how much better is wisdom than gold and understanding than silver? The great thing about authentic friends that are going to call you on things, is actually when they're calling you on things, they're not trying to diminish you. They're actually trying to cause you to flourish in the purposes of God for your life. I mean, that's just, absolutely. I think, having said that, this thought about gracious, so you want friends that are faithful, you want friends that are authentic to you, but gracious, and I really believe that's that whole thing about, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Gracious friends are friends that, to be gracious, to be kind, to be generous to you with their time. I mean, again, if a friend is someone, or if you've got friends that are going to abandon you at every bump across the road, really, is that where they're at, or so what's a gracious friend? Someone that gives you time, someone that understands you. I remember earlier, in an earlier part of my life, that I had a friend, as it were, and whenever we got together, all that friend wanted to do was tell me about what they thought and all the rest, but there was never any part of that relationship that they actually understood who I was.
Yeah.
Nor did they tend to want to. And I just thought to myself, you don't even understand me. I'm not quite, all I was basically an ear to bend.
That's right. That's right. So let's just talk about that for a moment. You've had to coach a lot of leaders in business and in church world as well. And, we hear a lot, Dave, about toxic relationships.
Yeah.
And I love your analogy, the bigger, better, braver, and obviously the opposite of that is it really fits the mold of what is a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And at the very start, you said a really interesting thing, no hermits, really have ever sort of spoken to you about, how to do life in a flourishing way. It's it's quite a withdrawn thing.
Yeah.
Stendhal actually said, one can acquire everything in solitude except character.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, the three levels of a relationship you mentioned, the mentors, our peers, and those that we mentor. Let's reflect on that for a moment on two things. The first is about the toxic nature of some relationships and how we deal with that, because whether we like it or not, even in church life, we do wind up, finding there are some things that are toxic that we have to address.
Yeah.
But beyond that, on the more positive side of that, there's also the nature of relationship for the future. How do people build great friendships that are built to last?
Yeah.
And I think what we've been covering sort of speaks into that really strongly.
Yeah.
But let's reflect back firstly on the toxic relationships. What do you say to people when you see that they're caught up in quite a toxic situation?
Yeah, sometimes people stay in toxic relationships because it's what they know. They've been conditioned by that, either through, unfortunately, a poor family life, or that's been the normal in how they were brought up, and so there's a familiarity around it. But again, it's not making them bigger, braver, or better at all. And so the question then becomes is, there's this saying that says, show me, your top 5 friends and I'll show you your future. Yeah. And so there's something that we cannot escape, because we're relational creatures or relational beings, that we will never outgrow, our life will never outgrow the context of probably our top 3 to 5 relationships. So the question is not about, is this, even though these people might be familiar, at what cost? Yeah. What's it costing you? What's it costing maybe your family? What's it costing your future to have those people in your lives? And is it worth it?
Wow.
Is it worth it? And if it's not, then we need to make some changes. Now, the hard thing about that is when those toxic relationships happen to be family members, because someone says, well, I can't divorce my mother, and I say, no, you can't divorce your mother. She will always be your mother, and you need to honor that. However, she doesn't need to be your best friend.
Right. Yeah, it's a really
right.
Good.
So there's a difference between the two of that.
So there's a loving way to create distance in toxic relationships.
I always say you've got to, and this is it seems such a clinical thing to say, you've got to architect your relationships. In other words, understand what's toxic, and if it's toxic, if you have something toxic, you're not going to hold it close to you. No. At that point, you're going to hold it at a distance if you have to hold it. Otherwise, you're going to cut that thing off, right? So you just there's an intentionality about relationships, and I think as you get older, you realize that this is costing me my life or the flourishing parts of my world. I think the other thing about what's the second question?
Well, the upside. Yeah. One of my observations, and maybe we finish on this thought here.
Sure.
I've had great mentors in my life, and I feel very grateful to God. But I would say probably the most authentic, faithful, and probably gracious relationships I've had have probably been my mates. Right. Those who have been my peer level, and often they will be more direct and more confronting. They'll probably kick me in the bum, but they tend to give me the most authentic, secure relationship. And we're talking like 30 to 40 years of relationships in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So let's finish on that thought. The nature of great friendship in terms of peer-to-peer.
I think that, again, what you want to find in a relationship is synergy of values. You cannot afford, you will not flourish if you surround yourself with people that have a radically different value set to you.
Wow.
There's something about the synergy or the momentum that's built between clusters. And that's where, we're relational beings. Flourishing in a biblical sense has to do with unity, oneness. Jesus speak, that's the Jesus prayer in John 17.
Yeah, that's right.
This thought about oneness and flourishing. And I'm just so grateful that the Word of God is filled with clear strategy and insight. I think Proverbs is such a rich book around, when you're talking about flourishing in friendships, that really does become our manual in many respects. We should meditate into these Proverbs and really then go and architect our world in our friendships in alignment with the Word of God, not just our emotional preferences.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, we really want to thank you for joining us in this episode of Flourish, especially focusing on flourishing friendships. And we just want to pray for you that you will have all the goodness of a flourishing, healthy, connected depth of relationship in all of your contexts. God bless you.